What are Scary Phrolova's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Are you a big Cantarella simp? Did you pull for her on her initial banner, wishing that she had a better team to work in? Well hey, today's your lucky day, because I believe that Phrolova is going to be the first real user of Cantarella that genuinely definitively wants her. Ever since the Jellyfish Lady has come out, we've kind of been coping with her. She's indeed good in dungeon teams, and can be a solid second slot teammate for multiple good DPSs. However, there's not really been any character up until this point that really definitively wants Cantarella in particular. However, it's finally the Jellyfish Lady's time to shine, as it appears as if Phrolova is going to be her definitive best assault DPS. Both characters benefit from echo-based abilities within their kit. Phrolova's unique as she's able to summon Hecate in order to do damage all field for her, and whenever an echo skill is used in the team, Hecate's able to do a coordinated attack. So this makes for a unique synergy in which both characters involved really like using echo-based abilities. It's likely that the Jellyfish Lady's outro skill is going to be fully leveraged here, and all around, there is no better time than now to be a Cantarella fan, because Phrolova is most definitely going to be rising her meta value. I also believe that she's going to have a decent amount of accessibility. I'm not going to say amazing for reasons that I'll mention later, but I do think that her accessibility will be solid. This is partially because she's a Rectifier user, and we all know what that means. String Master time. If you pull for String Master, then congratulations. Here is another DPS that you're able to share a weapon to. Seriously, if the WuWa meta had a central headquarters, then Sanhua and String Master would be the heads of it. I have a hard time believing that she's not going to be able to use this very versatile Rectifier, because basically every Rectifier DPS up until this point has been able to make very good use out of it. Otherwise, because she's a Havoc DPS, you're able to consider using Donjon as a second slot teammate. This is mostly to take advantage of a Bloodthirsty Lady's outro skill, in which she's able to provide Havoc damage bonus to Phrolova. It's a nice free-to-play friendly setup that pretty much anybody is going to be able to access if you have at least one copy of Donjon. I'm not going to glaze her accessibility as being absolutely insane, because it's not really as good as, say, Phoebe, for example, but it's still pretty decent, and it's much better in comparison to negative status units. Another insane pro in regards to Phrolova is that Roccia is going to be an actually valuable unit now. I actually didn't really see this coming. I mean, okay, I somewhat did, since I felt like, considering that Roccia was so underutilized up until this point, she would have some degree of usability with Phrolova, but no, it actually looks like she has a definitive best installed team where I can actually see you justifiably pulling for her now. She's still a niche pull, but she's an actually good one now. Because previously, the Clown Kid was getting, ironically enough, absolutely clowned on by Sanhua within Camellia teams, but now, it actually looks like we're seeing a triple Havoc scenario, in which you're gonna want to use Phrolova, Cantarella, and then Roccia. It'd be Roccia swapping into Cantarella, and then the Jellyfish swapping into the Conductor. This is actually a pretty significant deal in my opinion, because Roccia genuinely was just super hard to justify before, and I would say that she was the main outlier unit in terms of limited 5 stars, in the sense that basically every limited 5-star could be justifiably pulled for and be called a good investment, but Roccia was the one case where it was like, if you really want to stretch it, then fine, but it's super hard to justify her and say that she's an actually good pull. And the good news is that if you skipped out on her the first time, it's not like you made a bad decision, because what do you know? She's gonna be rerunning alongside Phrolova, so happy days, basically everyone wins. And consider how fun the triple fusion team is that we currently have in-game. We're gonna be getting a similar situation for Havoc, and I think that's really cool, because triple fusion is an amazing time. And it also feels really freaking strong. Now granted, I do think that it's likely that Shorekeeper is probably going to be a just fine alternative to Roccia. I still don't necessarily think that she's going to be some absolute must pull. And as time goes on, we are getting more and more specialized third slot teammates, making Shorekeeper less needed. But with that being said, I still ultimately think it's an everyone wins situation, since if you invested into Roccia back then, well then congratulations, your investment was no longer a big waste. And if you didn't invest into Roccia and you still don't want the Clown Kid, then it's likely that you're going to be able to get away with just using Shorekeeper just fine, and that's really, really neat. So Phrolova's going to be saving the meta positions of both Havoc characters that previously were not doing too hot in the meta. I think that's great. Honestly, I wasn't expecting that. I thought that she was only going to save one of them and then the other would maybe be just like, okay at best with Phrolova. I didn't think that she would make both of them genuinely good viable units that you would go out of your way to pull for, specifically to support your Phrolova, but hey, look where we are. So if you're really big on either of those two units, or you pulled them and they don't really have a major use case on your account at the minute, well then there you go. There's also the potential for Phrolova to be a part of the overall best Havoc team in the game. In fact, I'm pretty confident that this is going to be the case. I would be surprised if Triple Havoc didn't end up being the absolute best in slot premium option for Havoc teams. But who knows? The avenue is always there, and Camellia is still a very strong unit in the meta right now. However, with that being said, I am pretty convinced that she is going to end up being a very, very strong Havoc unit. And likely the best one in the game. Now granted, I don't really like putting a lot of importance on elements because I don't really think it matters that much outside of heavy resistances. And the only time that elemental correspondence in teams really matters is whenever you're playing a negative status comp. But with that being said, if you're somebody that does care about collecting characters of numerous elements, and to be fair, you do want at least one coverage in case your entire account gets countered if you build too hard into one element, then yes, Phrolova's gonna be your best bet if you're interested in Havoc in particular. I can see her being very, very strong, and the bar has generally been very high for 2.x characters. Something else that I'd also really like to point out about Phrolova is that she has very unique mechanics. I personally consider this a pro because I always like when Kuro Games is experimental with their gameplay. She's very interesting when it comes to her gameplay. She doesn't have a traditional form of energy. There's no normal resonance liberation for her. Instead, it's all tied to her forte skill, and she's really, really heavily tied around echoes. In fact, interestingly enough, it looks like they're incorporating the whole conductor thing into her own kit, because she's going to have Hecate fight alongside her, which is very, very interesting in my opinion. Hecate's able to do numerous different things. It all depends on Phrolova's forte bar. It has grouping and is able to do coordinated attacks. This is all very interesting in my opinion. I'd say that if you're somebody that's interested in different types of gameplay and you want to see something more unique, then Phrolova's honestly a great option to go for, because her gameplay is unlike anything we've seen in Wuthering Waves thus far. Chances are there's definitely going to be a lot of unique things that people are going to discover when it comes to her gameplay. So kudos to Kuro for making a genuinely interesting kit. Alas, as many good things as Phrolova has going for her, she does indeed still have her own set of cons. For starters, her setup is going to be kind of weak. Her first rotation is likely not to be that strong, because you have to actually set up the summon first. I would expect that from that point onwards, you'll pretty much be fine. However, I do expect the start of her gameplay to feel a little bit slow, because you have to actually go and set up the summon and go through the work of actually getting it on field. It's just part of the price you have to pay in being one of the first characters to have a unique new gimmick. Speaking of paying the price, the reason why I didn't really want to go and glaze her accessibility earlier is because her premium team is quite expensive. Here's the thing. With Triple Fusion, those are all characters that I can realistically see somebody pulling for on their own. Maybe not Lupa because she's very much fusion-centric, but the others? Absolutely. Changli is amazing for many teams, and she's super versatile in many situations, an amazing quick swapper all around. Brent Wuthering Waves, while he's less versatile than Changli, he's still a really good second stall teammate for many DPSs, and can even be a DPS himself if you have Lupa. And while it is a lot more cope to do so without Lupa, you can still make him a main DPS on his own if you use Sanhua as his second slot teammate. So with Triple Fusion, it makes sense. You have them all? Great. They can form one very seamless rotation with all of each other. However, if you only have a handful of them, that's also fine, because they can work across other teams on your account. When it comes to the Havoc trio, you're basically only really pulling them for each other. If you get Cantarella or Roccia, you're very much only getting them because you really want your Phrolova to be good. Now granted, Cantarella can work in other situations, but I wouldn't say she's as versatile as Brant would be, or Changli even. And we all already know how tragic the case of Roccia is. Yes, she has Camellia teams, but pulling her just for Camellia teams is such a waste of pulls when she's barely an upgrade there. And when she's, of course, way too overkill for Whimpering Wastes, when Camellia on her own should be able to do it just fine. So while I do think that at a baseline, you can indeed make a free-to-play friendly Phrolova work, I do think that her premium team is quite costly, because the units that you're being asked to pull for if you want her premium team, yeah, they're very Phrolova-centric. I don't think it's as bad as pulling a negative status support for a negative status character. I would say that that's definitely at least a whole notch worse, but with that being said, this isn't great either in terms of accessibility. I'm sure it's going to be a great and seamless premium team, and ultimately, Phrolova's release is fantastic news for fans of these units, because both of them were just so underutilized in the meta before. This is more so a problem if you don't have either of them, you don't particularly care about either of them, but you are a fan of the Conductor Lady, because unfortunately, these two niche characters, yeah, they don't really do much, but they are likely going to help out your Phrolova a whole lot. But I will say, I don't actually think she's going to be bad free to play by any means, not at all. I'm sure she's still going to be quite strong. I just do think it hurts her overall accessibility a bit, because these aren't really characters that you would be getting for any reason outside of Phrolova. Ultimately, I think Phrolova looks pretty decent. She seems to be a good Havoc DPS. We'll see what happens whenever she comes out. I'd say that it's great that she's saving 2 characters that previously just didn't really have much of a use, and now they're finally gonna have some actual viable meta bearing, so that's really cool. Her entire team roster seems perfectly skippable to me. There's no real reason to go for it, because we have plenty of viable DPSs in the game already. I mean, this is Wuthering Waves, there's not really such a thing as a bad limited 5-star DPS. I'd say my issue in terms of her premium team setup is that most of her 5-star DPSs don't really have as expensive of a team setup unless they're a negative status unit, but like I said earlier, you can get away with just using Shorekeeper instead of Roccia, and considering how teams are getting more specialized nowadays, that is becoming easier to do. So all around, I'd say a decent character. How about yourself? Are you gonna be getting Phrolova, or is it a skip for you? Let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a second channel where I just kind of cover whatever in regards to gacha games. Head on over and check that out if it's something that you're interested in. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Phrolova's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and I hope you conduct your polls with a 50-50 win.